The 521st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he dunks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys once again tonight here on a Thursday. We are a little inside 48 hours away from Carolina renewing its rivalry with the Duke Blue Devils. That game will come your way Saturday evening, 6:30 p.m. over on ESPN, in a game that has a lot on the line in terms of legacies for an all-time Carolina player in R.J. Davis. And the Tar Heels will look to really solidify themselves as an NCAA tournament team if they can avenge a loss to Duke from earlier in the season. We'll do what we do in every preview edition of the show. We'll take a look at the opponent, tell you everything you need to know about the Blue Devils. We'll look at the game from Carolina's perspective. We'll talk about senior night and what it means and what's on the line for Carolina in this game before we give our keys to the game and pick the game. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. And when we get to the Duke game, it's a real simple pod thought. And it's something that as Carolina fans, we live and die by every single day, but especially once we get to the matchup with Duke. And that pod thought is simply go to hell, Duke. And, this is something that, we sing in our fight song. We chant it, when we're at sporting events. I live it every day as a producer on the radio that talks about North Carolina and Duke basketball on a just about everyday basis this time of the year. But, when you're coming into this game with so much on the line for Carolina, looking to secure a spot in the tournament, you want to send an all-time Tar Heel out with one final win in the Smith Center, and a win that, in a lot of people's mind, he still needs to really further a positive legacy in Chapel Hill for many years to come for R.J. Davis. I feel like, for as much as we got told after 2022 that it was never going to be the same, the rivalry would never reach that fever point, it would never reach the magnitude that it reached when those two teams met in the Final Four. I do feel like the feelings and the hatred, for me, that fire still burns. I still have a bad taste in my mouth for what happened back in early February when Carolina got blown out, when Carolina got embarrassed, and Carolina basically got punked in Cameron, trailing by as many as 42-13 in the first half. So every day, but even a little bit more so going into this game, the motto, go to hell, Duke, it rings a little bit more true as Carolina looks to avenge a loss earlier this season to the Blue Devils.
Yeah, a blowout loss at that to a team that is having an amazing season, could potentially be staring down another Final Four appearance, but Carolina wants to upset that. Carolina wants to sort of do what they did just a few years ago back in 2022 when all the attention was on Duke coming into that game as well. And Carolina found a way to come out with a victory when pretty much nobody gave them a chance. And that's what they're going into in this game as well, because as well as Carolina's been playing, man, Duke's been playing just as well, if not even better, against this conference, just destroying teams. Carolina's won 5 straight games by double figures. I mean, Duke has won, I think it's 6 or 7 straight by double figures. And the last time that they didn't do that was against Clemson. So since that loss, all Duke has been doing is absolutely blowing the doors off of teams where earlier in conference season, it was a little bit easier for teams to be able to compete with them. But I think it sets up for a perfect recipe. You mentioned, that the fire is still there. Oh, the fire is definitely still here because I'm tired of hearing about this team. This team is as annoying as the Duke team has been in a long, long time because, I think there are certain aspects that are special about this team. Do I think this is the best team in the country? Oh, I absolutely do not think that. I do not think that they are one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country. I think they're probably 4th as of right now because I think the SEC really is that dominant. So I think this is a chance for Carolina with their backs against the wall even still, because say what you want, man, Carolina is in a situation where if SMU ends up losing, there is a good chance that regardless of what happens, they are probably going to have to win one of 2 matchups with Duke. Because if SMU loses, if they don't fall to the 6th spot in the ACC, there is a chance that they will have to play Wake Forest, a game that would help them in absolutely no way. They're looking for that next quad 1 win, and this is your chance to get it. So hopefully Carolina comes out with the fire from, just the rivalry in general, but a little bit of extra motivation by the fact that you got your butts handed to you in the first matchup, and hopefully that's what fuels them in this matchup.
A lot of parallels have been drawn back to what Carolina did in this game back in 2022. There are some similarities. There's not a Hall of Fame head coach that's coaching in his final home game. But Carolina went into that matchup needing to win to solidify itself against an NCAA or to solidify itself as a tournament team. Carolina entered that game, I think, having won 6 of their previous 7 matchups. Carolina enters right now on a 6-game winning streak. And according to a lot of analytics, they have blossomed into one of, if not the best offensive teams in the country over the last 3 games. So Carolina is trending towards being a team that is capable of beating Duke. When they met back in February, the only reason why you thought Carolina could win the game was because it was Duke Carolina. And just because it is a rivalry matchup that to the truest extent, you can throw out the record books, you can throw out everything that happened up to that point. You just never know what was going to happen. And that was simply not the case once the team got on the floor. They got overwhelmed, they got overmatched, and they were non-competitive for the majority of the game. And that wasn't even the turning point for Carolina. It took an even not a more embarrassing loss, but another blowout loss, 10 days later on the road at Clemson for Carolina to really to get their crap together. There's really no other way to say it, for them to really do what they needed to do to play to their talent level. And I've stated this during the last 2 to 3 weeks. The way Carolina is playing right now is what we thought they were going to play like all season long back in the preseason. They've always been capable of playing like this. I don't think this is something that they're just playing in over their heads. They're shooting the ball extremely well, and at some point, shots aren't going to fall as consistently as they've fallen from the outside, but their intensity, their competitive spirit, their fight, all of that was there for the makings, and it just took until the middle of February for it to all come together. Hopefully it wasn't too little too late, and Carolina can get a win on Saturday to ensure they'll go dancing in the NCAA tournament later this month. We'll set the scene now for the game on Saturday. As you know, Duke won the first matchup 87-70 over in Durham in a game that was not even as close as the final score would indicate. But the Heels do lead the all-time series 145-118. Just some historical stats about the rivalry. Carolina won the first ever matchup 36-25 back in 1920. Carolina's largest margin of victory in the rivalry matchup was a 53-point win that came back in 1921. The Heels hold the longest winning streak in the history of the rivalry. They won 16 straight games from 1921 through 1928. This game is being played in Chapel Hill, of course, with it being played in the Smith Center. And in Chapel Hill, Carolina is 66-39 against Duke, but they are just 21-18 in the Smith Center. So, you're going to see the graphics. They're going to mention it throughout the broadcast during the game and during the 2-hour College Game Day show that'll air live from the Smith Center on Saturday morning about how close the games are dating back to the last 100 matchups, et cetera, et cetera. We know what this rivalry is. We know the greatness that it is, the excellence that it is. It delivers 99.9% of the time. The first matchup did not deliver. But I did want to touch on this really quickly on the pod. It was announced last Saturday that College Game Day was going to Chapel Hill for the matchup. Not a surprise to you, not a surprise to me, but it surprised a lot of college basketball fans, including SEC fans that probably discovered that college basketball existed within the last 5 years. It even prompted Dan Wolken, a member of the National, to quote the tweet and call the game irrelevant. And say that at some point ESPN will learn that this game has lost the reverence that it used to have within the college basketball community. We talked about it on air during WFNZ, basically saying that College Game Day should go here twice every single year until the end of time. And the day that I said that the day that College Game Day is not in Durham and not in Chapel Hill for both games would signal the end of college basketball as an entity, and that the sport would no longer cease to exist. What do you make of these SEC fans, Missouri fans getting upset that College Game Day is not in Columbia, Missouri for Missouri and Kentucky, or this idea that College Game Day should have went to Auburn, Alabama, a game that is not meaningless. It's meaningless in terms of the SEC race, with Auburn already having locked up the SEC regular season title. Auburn, in my opinion, has already locked up the number 1 overall seed for the NCAA tournament. Bama, with their loss last night to Florida, could use the win to get back in the 1 seed conversation. But a lot of people thought they should have gone to that game over Duke, Carolina. What do you make of all the negativity surrounding College Game Day choosing to go to Chapel Hill as opposed to some SEC games for the final regular season broadcast of the season?
I mean, it's stupidity. I mean, it's what you would expect is going to happen because, everybody thinks that now this rivalry has jumped the shark because you had the matchup in the Final Four, and it doesn't get any better than that. But it doesn't matter. These games are still great. Every time that these teams meet outside of the last time that they met, and again, that's not unprecedented. This has happened before where a team has blown out the other team. And guess what? It still was followed by either a great matchup the next time around, or God forbid, there is one season where the matchups aren't close. The next season, you're going to probably get 2 really great matchups. That's how this rivalry works. That's why it's the greatest rivalry in sports. Because when you look at all the other rivalries, I mean, there are other ones where, they won't go to, the Sunday Night Baseball, before ESPN decided to drop it as an entity. They were times they wouldn't go and to Yankees Red Sox because, frankly, the rivalry has been terrible recently because one team has dominated. It's typically been the Yankees that have absolutely dominated. The NFL, we debate all the time about what is the greatest rivalry in the NFL because there really isn't one. Usually the one that people turn to is Green Bay and Chicago. How can that really be a rivalry when one team dominates it as badly as the Packers do? This is a matchup that, yes, Carolina holds the all-time advantage in, but really since Coach K first took the job there, it's been really even between these two sides. And so, that when we say it always delivers, people may make fun of that, but it seriously does. It's very rare that you leave that game. If you're a fan of one of the two teams, you're either going to leave one way or the other. But if you're a neutral observer of that game, there is no way, if you love college basketball, that you leave that game disappointed most of the times that you watch it. Whereas these other matchups, dude, let's be real honest. Do we know how good Alabama really is? Are they guaranteed to be one of the even 8 best teams in the country right now? Because they have faced some really good teams down the stretch in the SEC, and they've lost to most of them. So who's to say that this matchup between them and Auburn doesn't turn into a blowout? So you go there and you say, yeah, we're throwing tradition away. We're going to go to Auburn, Alabama, because we think this year that's the better matchup. Won't be by next year. Won't be, I guarantee you. But we think that this year it's the better matchup. You get there and it turns out to be a flop. Then what do you say to the people? And whoever is saying that they should be in Columbia, Missouri, come on, man. Just let's be realistic with ourselves. College game day should never be in Columbia, Missouri. There is no reason for it to be in Columbia, Missouri, because Missouri basketball is irrelevant. It has always been irrelevant, and it will never be relevant. So I don't understand why anybody would think that Kentucky and Missouri, a battle for what? If they are even still battling for position in the SEC, it's like what? For 4th or 5th place, if that, in the conference? Come on, man. Don't give me that crap. You are talking about the greatest rivalry in sports. They are in the right location.
Well, I think it is still proven true. Casual college basketball fans start watching college basketball in February when Duke and Carolina play for the first time. The people that tune in for the month of March and get ready for Champ Week into the tournament, guess when they start watching? They start watching in the second Duke-Carolina game. And no, this year it does not have ACC between the both of them. They're both not competing for an ACC regular season title. But look at what's on the line in this matchup. For as great and as dominant as Duke is, Duke has to win this game to secure an ACC regular season title. There's a scenario where if Duke loses, Duke, with as dominant as this team has been, and we're talking about they are reaching dominance in terms of what their program did in 1999 when they played for the national championship. There's a scenario where if they lose, they could be the 3 seed in the ACC tournament next week in Charlotte. With Carolina, this is a team that is trending towards making the NCAA tournament. Yes, they're still in need of another marquee win to do so, and a win over Duke would register as such. You've got an all-time great player in R.J. Davis playing his final collegiate game. So there's that storyline because, senior day still has meaning in Chapel Hill. And I'll say this, and I'll say it until the day that I die. I know that North Carolina as a state has grown more than to just being a college basketball state. You've got the NFL. You've got the Carolina Panthers. You've got an NBA team. You've got an MLS team that has had a lot of success early on. College football has become more popular, I think, in the state than we probably ever thought it would have been, despite none of the programs at the power conference level really winning anything of note. The thing that this state does best, what Josh Graham calls the crown jewel, is Duke Carolina. This is what our state does best. It's college basketball with these two programs. And I'll be damned if I want to see College Game Day that's had a really good year. It's been a really good show, and it's done a really good job covering the sport. Is that an SEC game that most of their fans just started caring about basketball 5 years ago, as opposed to two schools that eat, sleep, and breathe basketball? Like if Bama and Auburn flame out, will that fan base be disappointed in March? Yes, I would imagine so. But their fan base is still more worried about their quarterback battle in spring, what the 27th transfer is going to do on the football field. They're not basketball schools. We're basketball schools. This is a basketball safe haven, and ESPN needs to protect it for as long as possible, because it's still one of the few things we have left in college athletics that is pure. And you don't want to lose that purity, because it's what makes college athletics different from the pro sports. So I'm glad that it's in Chapel Hill. We're going to be in attendance for the show on Saturday. Excited to be a part of that. But all you SEC fans that just started to pretend to care about college basketball on a somewhat realistic level, don't get your panties in a wad. This is where College Game Day should be, and they made the right decision. Let's now get into the preview portion of this edition of the podcast. We'll take a look at Duke first. Duke brings with them a 27-3 record, and they are, as I mentioned, 18-1 in the ACC, but they need a win to clinch the outright ACC regular season title. Away from Durham, this team has been good, and they've been dominant, winning many a times in blowout fashion. They are 9-1 away from Cameron Indoor Stadium in true road games. They have three players averaging double-figure scoring, led by Cooper Flagg, who's in the running to be the National Player of the Year. He's averaging 19.6 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.2 assists, while shooting 50% from the field and 38% from three. Con Knippel's the second leading scorer at 13.6 points, 3.9 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He is shooting 46% from the field, 40% from three. And then Tyrese Proctor, the last guy to average double-figure scoring, he's averaging 11.8 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2.2 assists, while shooting 44% from the field, 40% from three. Proctor returned from injury back earlier this week in Duke's blowout win over Wake Forest. It's unknown about the status of Malik Brown, who is a great defender for Duke, really connects them on that end of the floor. If he could not go, it'd be a big blow for them, and it'd give Carolina a little bit more of a hope of being able to really score the way they need to score against Duke to really give themselves a chance to win on Saturday night. There's no running away from the fact that this Duke team has been dominant. While Carolina's been blowing out opponents the last couple of weeks, that's what Duke has done for the majority of the conference season. When they have won in blowout fashion, and they have won with the game typically over in the first half, and if not in the first half, by the under 16 timeout in the second half. But we saw at Clemson when this team lost, they are vulnerable. And if Carolina can keep this game close and keep this game tight, their freshmen have looked like freshmen in big spots away from home with neutral site losses, to Kansas and Kentucky in the non-con, and that true road loss at Clemson back in early February. What do you make of this version of Duke that Carolina will make, or that Carolina will see on Saturday night, because they enter this game just as hot as we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough matchup, man. You're talking about maybe the best player in the entire country in Cooper Flagg. Con Knippel, who started to find a little more consistency as the year has gone along, even more consistent than he was the first time that these two met. And then, Kaman Malawach, what a matchup that's going to be inside for Carolina to try to deal with him once again after he was dominant in that first game on the glass. They've also got guys that are contributing off the bench. You mentioned Malik Brown, who's a guy that can pull more than his weight for this team when they need him to. But now you're getting a guy in Isaiah Evans who's starting to find his role on this team. has become an important part of what they do, especially shooting the ball from the outside. And even with Malik Brown out, they've just found another guy that they can play there that can take his minutes. And yeah, he might not be the defender that he is, but you could argue a better offensive player in Patrick Ngangba. So, I mean, this is a guy that, for Carolina, they have to be aware of him as well, especially at 6'11". He's going to bring the size that they want to compete against Carolina, to overwhelm Carolina with. So it's going to be a tough matchup. There's no doubt about it. And this team all around, you just look at how good they are in most of these major statistical areas. I mean, inside of the top 15 in the country in points scored per game and points allowed per game. Field goal percentage, they are 16th in the country in made field goal percentage on the offensive end, 4th in allowed field goal percentage on the other end of the floor. I mean, it's just all across the board, even three-point shooting, inside of the top 50 in both of those categories, 17th in offensive three-point percentage, 36th in defensive three-point percentage. And then don't even get started with the rebounding, where they lead the ACC at 38.9 rebounds per game, 28th in the country. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that would tell you Carolina doesn't really stand much of a chance in this game when other teams in this conference haven't been able to hold their own against them. But remember that Carolina is finding their stride on the glass. They've dominated that area too. Yeah, they've won by double digits in the last 5 games. They've also had a double-digit margin on the glass in all of those games as well. So, I mean, we knew this was going to be a tough test. We knew that this was what Carolina was building for, and this is why it was important that they got the type of momentum that they got. And this is the thing, man, when it comes to this rivalry, this is why it's great, because weird things can happen in this rivalry. And I think that's going to be one of the important things, is that Carolina's got to feed off of the momentum that they have against a team in Duke who's feeling themselves as well coming in.
Yep, absolutely. Carolina has their work cut out for them, but Carolina's also playing at a high level. This is the best brand, the best version of basketball this team has played all year long, and I think they will have Duke's full attention as they begin their preparation for Carolina, as opposed to the first time, man. They knew Carolina was not playing well. Carolina was not confident, and they knew if they jumped on them, they could really make the game as ugly as they ended up making it in that 87-70 win a little over a month ago. If you look at the game from Carolina's perspective, they are 20-11 on the year. 4 straight years, Carolina's won at least 20 games under Hubert Davis. 65th time in program history they've won at least 20 games. They are 13-6 in the ACC, and with a win on Saturday night, they would clinch the number 4 spot in the ACC tournament. During this 6-game winning streak, Carolina is averaging 90.8 points per game. So they are scoring at a high octane level. They're doing it very efficiently. I don't know if you can ask this team to score 90 on Saturday night, but they're going to need to be as efficient as they've been over the last handful of weeks. In the Smith Center, Carolina is 11-2 with home wins over Elon American, LaSalle, Georgia Tech, Campbell, SMU, California, Boston College, Pittsburgh, NC State, Virginia, and Miami. Their 2 home losses, Alabama and Stanford. Just like Duke, Carolina has 3 players currently averaging double-figure scoring, led by the All-American R.J. Davis, and is 17.2 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists. He's shooting 40% from the field, 33% from 3. Ian Jackson, the second double-digit leading scorer, 13.5 points, 3 rebounds, 0.9 assists. He is shooting 48% from the field, 41% from behind the three-point line. And then Seth Trimble, the last guy to average double-figure scoring, 12.1 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.4 assists. He is shooting 45% from the field, 30% from 3. What's different about this version of Carolina as opposed to the version that we saw a little over a month ago, Jalen Withers is your starting four-man, and he has brought, I think, new energy, new life to Carolina's starting lineup. And he's allowed Drake Powell to slide into his natural position at the 3, where he's better as a defender and as a rebounder. Withers has provided the floor spacing that Hubert Davis wants and desires. He's shooting the 3 ball as well as anybody right now on the roster. But in addition to him, Ben Allen Lubin has really come into his own and has really secured Carolina's front court. He's coming off his first double-double as a Tar Heel and what he did earlier this week at Virginia Tech. His last time in Chapel Hill, he led the team in scoring while shooting 9 of 10 from the field. And make no mistake about it, as well as RJ is playing right now as a scorer and as a distributor, as well as Ian Jackson is playing coming off the bench, Seth Trimble playing off the bench. Those guys were game changers for Carolina in the win at Virginia Tech on Monday night. Carolina is going to need Withers to be the impactful Withers he has been over the last 3 weeks. And they're going to need Ben Allen Lubin to hold his own on the inside if they want any chance of keeping A, this game closer than it was the first time, but B, to put themselves in position to win the ball game.
Yeah, I think there's 2 guys that are really key to Carolina's success in this game. And I think it starts with Jalen Withers because his ability to stretch the floor, his ability to defend just about any position. I mean, he's going to have to be very involved on the glass, and he's going to have to be very involved in what Carolina is doing from beyond the arc. If he can do that, that's different from the first time around for Carolina. The other guy that I think matters a lot is Drake Powell. You go back, this was the stat that came out from Trevor William Marks, who does a great job for Inside Carolina. And he found this stat according to College Basketball Analytics. When Drake Powell is on the floor, Carolina has a plus 35 net rating, a 146 offensive rating, and a 111 defensive rating. When he's off the floor, their net rating is negative 2.8, and you have just a 118 offensive rating and a 121.4 defensive rating. So they are better defensively according to that. But offensively, you see how impactful he's been for Carolina here recently. He's shooting the ball very well from beyond the arc. And again, that is something that's different for Carolina than the first time around. His length is also going to be a factor in this game and should help Carolina on the glass. I think those are the 2 things that you look at and say are completely different from the first time that these 2 teams met, because neither one of these guys were really overly effective. If they were playing, they weren't consistent enough. Now they've sort of found that consistent groove. And I think that at this point, Carolina needs to look, when you're looking at the success that Carolina's had, you need to point to these 2 guys. And I think that's going to be the biggest difference for Carolina in this game than the first time around. Not to mention the fact that Ben Allen Lubin, the guy at the 5 spot who will be matching up against Kaman Malawach, will present a much different threat offensively than he presented in the first game.
All right, we know Saturday night is the regular season finale, which means it's senior night. And it's going to be the last time we get to watch RJ Davis play a home game at UNC. And I can tell you as a fan, not ready for the emotions that come along with this game with a player like RJ. There have been some years where we've had a group of kids that we got really close to, and their final home game wasn't against Duke. Marcus Page, Bryce Johnson, their senior night was against Syracuse. Armando Bacot last year, his final home game was against Notre Dame. We were actually in the building for that. And because Hubert Davis does stuff a little bit differently than Roy Williams, not as emotional as a scene as it could have been, but When he exited the floor from the game, he got a standing ovation, and rightfully so. And so when you look at this game, it's not just RJ Davis we are saying goodbye to. You've got, seniors Jalen Withers and Ty Claude, who will play for a final time in the Smith Center. And this is not the first time that Carolina has gone through with this, with a special senior class having to end its season at home against Duke. It's also happened, in 2005, 2009, 2017. And yes, I know those were all 3 national championship seasons for Carolina, but it also happened back in 2019. That was, Cam Johnson and Luke May and Kenny Williams senior night. And then you go back to the 2021 year. That was more so because we didn't know it at the time because of COVID and the way the things worked out. That was Roy Williams' final home game as Carolina's head coach. But this is different because you've got an all-time great who, no matter what, cannot come back and cannot play another year in Chapel Hill, even though if I could find a way to have him back for 25-26, he would be back in Chapel Hill for next season. These are legacy-defining games, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or in RJ Davis's case, a super senior. When you look at his legacy, and it's something that we can't really talk about in full until the season officially comes to a close, but how much is riding on RJ's legacy to go out with a home win against your arch rival and in the process secure himself a spot in what would be a 4th NCAA tournament appearance?
I think there's something that's riding on it. My thing is that I'm not going to remember RJ Davis as less of a player if he doesn't win this game. I think that you should remember him as one of the all-time great Tar Heel scorers that there ever was. And I don't think it matters what ultimately happens. He's part of the team. The team is the reason that they are here. It's not because of RJ Davis. You could say whatever you want about RJ being the main reason that Carolina hasn't succeeded this year. If you think that, then I just don't know what to tell you. That is certainly not the main issue that Carolina had early in the season. Would it have helped if he, would have been able to knock down some shots from the outside? Certainly, but he didn't have space. There was a lot of the times where he was under duress early in the season. So I think this is certainly a big game. And it's going to be a big game for him. He's going to play like it is. But I don't think that this defines his legacy. I'm still going to remember the year that he had in 2023-24 if this doesn't work out and if this team misses the NCAA tournament. I'm still going to remember what he did for the team that just fell short of the tournament a few years prior, where he literally almost dragged that team to the tournament, if not for an injury that he suffered to his index finger. This dude has laid it on the line for Carolina for 5 years. He is as deserving as any Tar Heel to have his name in the rafters. This is one of those games where, if he ends up winning, it could be a legacy-defining type of win. But if he loses, it's not a legacy-defining loss. He's still going to be up in the rafters. He's still going to be remembered as one of the greatest of all time. And that's why, for him, though, I feel like he probably looks at this game as one that can really take him to the upper echelon, because I think there are some Tar Heel fans that'll sit here and that'll listen to what we say, and they'll say, oh, what are these guys talking about? He's not even close to being one of the all-time greats. You win this game, they absolutely cannot have that conversation. It just can't happen.
I think for me, this is why I never bought into when we won the game in 22 at Duke, when we won the game in the Final Four, and everyone told us that the rivalry was dead. You would never feel the same way that you felt in those moments. Guys, I want to beat Duke just as bad on Saturday as I wanted to beat them in 2022. And a big reason why is for this kid. There's nothing I want more than to watch him play the game of his life and beat the team that not only that I hate, RJ Davis hates Duke. Like, we had a chance he joined the show this morning. We had a chance to talk to him. And one of our hosts flat out asked him, hey, this is a rivalry that has a lot of respect, where a lot of guys are friends off the court, but when they step in the battle lines, and that's where they become competitors. And he was asked point blank, do you have friends? And he said no. And he did not. And they asked him for a chance to maybe double down and maybe clarify. And he said, I don't have any friends with those guys. We're talking about a sport that has changed, so much in 5 years, where it's driven Hall of Fame head coaches away to retirement. And our conference has suffered a great deal of this. You're talking about a kid that's endured, seeing his Hall of Fame head coach that recruited him retire. You're talking about a kid that endured trying to navigate playing through a pandemic and then playing for a first-time head coach. And then, dealt with some stuff personally off the court the year after winning a national championship that not only divided the team on the court, divided the team off the court, and dang near divided a fan base. And then was at the forefront last year of a team that restored our love and our faith and our trust in what Carolina basketball could be in the modern era of the NIL world and in the transfer portal. We try to find examples of what we want a Carolina basketball player to be. I cannot find I cannot think of a better example of that person than RJ Davis. He embodies every sentiment of what it means to be a Tar Heel. Like, he is Carolina, because in a day and time where people leave left and right, this kid stayed. He should have chased his NBA career, his pro career 2-3 years ago, because his stock was higher then than it is right now, unfortunately. But wearing that jersey, running out of that tunnel, playing on that floor, it still means something to him in a way that I want all of our guys to feel when they come to play at UNC. And so there's nothing that could happen that'll make me think any differently about RJ Davis than I do. He's a top 3 Carolina basketball player for me all time. Like, it's Marcus Page, it's RJ Davis, and then it's Joel Berry. And I want this kid to have a moment on Saturday. Because there are players that build to a point in time where they're worthy of having those moments where you get serenaded with love and praise. And RJ is one of those guys. And just hearing him talk on the radio today, there was a calmness in his voice, but there's also a confidence in his voice where he knows what Saturday is. He knows what it represents. And I think he's ready to play at the highest level possible, which this rivalry requires, this rivalry demands. And I hope that he's putting together a performance that when we do come back later in the offseason and we do have that ultimate legacy discussion, we could point to this game and say, that's why no matter what, he is a winner. He is an all-time Tar Heel. His jersey is going to go on the rafters, et cetera, et cetera. With that, we'll now get into our keys to the game. Before we make our picks, we do want to thank everybody that's joining us here live on a Thursday night, whether you're watching on YouTube, on Facebook, or at my Twitter page. We appreciate all of you for being live with us here tonight, getting us ready for the greatest rivalry in sports. The first key I have written down for this game, it's like a boxer that's the underdog. They've got to set the tone. Carolina's got to draw first blood. Carolina's got to punch first. They didn't do it in the first game. And I do think that's a big reason why that game just got so lopsided, because all the energy, all the emotion that was in Duke's building just became overwhelming. And it was too much for Carolina to handle. I'd love to think that, we know it's going to be a great environment. We know there's going to be an energy, a buzz that'll that'll exist all day leading up to the game. I'd love to think we could overwhelm Duke. I think they're just too good. They're too talented. They're too well coached for them to be overwhelmed on Saturday night. But Carolina's got to make it known by the first media timeout. This isn't going to be a repeat of what happened in Durham. That it's going to be a 40-minute fight, and we're here to go blow for blow. First key for me is they've got to come out. They got to draw blood. They've got to throw the first punch.
Yeah, and throwing the first punch doesn't necessarily mean that they've got to be leading at the under 16 timeout by like 5 or 10 or something like that. No. You're just looking for them to come out and show that, hey, we're what you said. We're here to compete. You're getting a fight in this game. The first time around, it might not have been, but we're a different basketball team now. And I think the big part of that is you've got to come out and hold on to the basketball early on. You take care of the basketball out of the gate, it's going to set you up for success, because that was the biggest issue that you had the first time around. Duke's length bothered you so badly that you were turning the ball over, or if you weren't turning it over, you weren't getting effective shots out of it. This time around, you've got to continue to do what has gotten you to this point offensively, which is find the right pass. They've done it so often here recently. You've got to be able to do it again early in this game, because right now you've got a lot of guys that are in rhythm. You got guys that are making shots from the outside. If you can continue to make those shots, then I think you've got a chance to succeed in this game. But I think that starts early. You'll know early if this team's ready to go shooting-wise in this game. And so that's the thing for me is, yes, you've got to be able to throw the first punch. Most importantly, you've got to show that you are able to shoot the ball at a high enough level to start this game, because if you're going to win, it's going to be by scoring a lot of points.
All right, the second key I have for Carolina is to compete on the glass. Greg Ward, who always is joining us and is always commenting on the post, so we have to keep turnovers under 6. We have to make 10 or more threes, get to the foul line more than them, and make our free throws, and we have to out-rebound them. Greg, I don't disagree with any of that, what you said. I do think, though, asking you to out-rebound them might be asking too much, but Carolina's got to compete. Mm-hmm. Like this cannot be a game where they're getting pummeled and they're getting punked on the glass, and Malawach and Cooper Flagg and those guys are just having a field day. And I do think Carolina's better equipped, man. I think Ben Allen Lubin is playing with a toughness on the interior that he hasn't played with as consistently as he has the last handful of games. There were some moments the other night where he did get out rebounded by a Hokie, but it was like the very next possession. He was going up between 2 or 3 guys and getting a grown man rebound. Jalen Withers had a double-double here recently. Drake Powell, in his natural position, has been a godsend for Carolina in terms of getting to the offensive glass and really impacting the game in that department. I think that's where Carolina's really got to make some hay in this game. They've got to impact the game on the offensive glass the way that they've had during this winning streak, and that's going to be a tall task. This is the biggest team they've seen so far this season, and the most athletic team they've seen so far this season. But when they went to Florida State, that was the second biggest team, and Carolina was on the glass from start to finish. So they've done it against size. Now you got to do it against Duke's size and Duke's athleticism. If they could generate 8 to 10 offensive rebounds to get 14 to 16 second chance points, I think that goes a long way to giving Carolina a formula to winning the game. But ultimately, they've got to be competitive on the glass to give themselves a chance. If they win the rebounding battle, like Greg Ward's talking about, and let's say they win at 45-40, I would not be surprised if we go to that final media timeout in the second half with Carolina in control of the chance to win the game.
To be fair, I don't think I want it to be 45-40. That would be a lot of missed shots that are available.
I'm talking about the rebounding battle.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at where Carolina's been recently. I mean, they're winning games where the rebounding margin is 38-27, somewhere in that range, where, I mean, look, I don't think that they're going to end up probably winning this rebounding battle because of just the sheer size that Duke has. I think that's one of those ones where, like, maybe you saw somewhat early in the season where Carolina would compete on the glass. They'd be right there. And unfortunately, they would fall just short in that rebounding margin. It doesn't mean I think they'll fall short in the game. I think as long as you are just about even with them, creating those offensive rebounding chances is going to be important. And here's the thing. Is it impossible for them to out-rebound this team? It is not, because the fact that they were able to rebound the way that they were against Florida State, that shows you that they can handle the size of certain teams. But yeah, there's a lot of physicality that's mixed in with the size for Duke. So are they prepared for that? I think they're going to be ready for that fight on the interior. I think you've seen Vin Allen Lubin hit his stride there. He's become a more consistent rebounder, especially on that offensive end. I think if he can grab those offensive rebounds and finish those second chance points, that'll be huge for Carolina. You've seen that Jalen Withers has had moments where he's rebounded incredibly well. This is one of those games where you hope that shows up. And you mentioned what Drake Powell's doing on the offensive glass. He's also become a better defensive rebounder too. So that's going to be the biggest thing, is that you've got to limit the second chance opportunities that Duke has. We remember the first matchup, what killed Carolina was the possession where Malawach pulled down 2 offensive rebounds, and it eventually leads to a wide open look on a third opportunity. That was really what broke the camel's back and led to the massive run that Duke went on. You've got to be able to avoid that in this game. Don't let them get those important offensive rebounds. Find a way to compete with them on that defensive end of the floor. If you do that, then I think Carolina has a really good chance to come away with the victory.
The last key I have written down was something that you talked about when we talked about punching first, and Greg Ward mentioned when he gave us his keys to the game. Carolina's got to make perimeter shots. I think they've got to make at least eight threes to have a chance. They've been making double-digit threes here recently. I think that's a tall task to ask, just given how well Duke defends the perimeter. And they'll be very much aware of what Carolina has done from the outside. I do think Carolina's in a position to get better looks against Duke this time around than they were back in Durham, with how much better they're getting their guards free with screening action involving Jalen Withers. They can actually run some horn sets, get into some Spain action. That's really helping free up some of Carolina's shooters from the outside. You're also going to need the shot making that has been present here recently. It's got to be there on Saturday. You're going to need RJ Davis to probably make 1 or 2 contested threes. You're going to need Ian Jackson to do what he's done, where he maybe takes 1 dribble and pulls up an NBA-style 3 where he's guarded, but, you know, it's a shot that's in the rhythm and the flow of the offense, and it's got to find the bottom of the net. And you're going to need Jalen Withers. I think he's the key to all this, because if he can provide floor spacing, then I do think Carolina can open up the floor, be able to drive this Duke defense a little bit better, a little bit easier than they were the first matchup, and get and generate quality looks as opposed to the first game. So you're going to need your 2 best perimeter shooters in terms of being able to make shots, in terms of RJ and Ian Jackson. They're going to probably need to make a combined, I'd say, 5 or 6 threes, but you're going to need the Jalen Withers that's provided the floor spacing to really be there. He needs to make those threes in the corner and those threes on the wing when the ball finds him, because if he can do that, then it really has to make Duke respect every inch of the floor. And that's been a big key for Carolina's offense here in the winning streak, because they've been able to attack defenses from all angles, which wasn't the case the first 3 months of the season.
Yeah, I think in order to win this game, I think Carolina's got to be able to make double-digit threes. It's just one of those situations where I think with, how good Duke is offensively, I know Carolina's been playing better defensively, but you do have to remember that during this losing streak, they did allow 82 to Syracuse and they did allow 85 to Florida State. And so I think what it shows you is that, yes, they are improved defensively, but they are not a team that is going to lock you down on that end of the floor. It's going to take a special offensive performance to win this game. And so, to me, you need all your guys to be in rhythm. But again, it all starts with your passing. It has to be crisp passes that are getting to guys at the right time. If you can do that, then you've got a heck of a chance to win this game, because this group has shown now. Earlier in the season, they were missing open shots from the outside. Now you leave them open, or you give them even a slight amount of space, these guys are knocking down tough threes. RJ Davis is doing it. We've seen Seth Trimble be able to knock it down. And Lord knows we know what Ian Jackson can do when he gets the ball in his hands and can create a little bit of space. That's going to be the key for Carolina, is that those shots have to be falling in this game, but you've got to be able to get the ball to guys in the right spots to be able to do what they do and create those shots from the outside. If Carolina can do that, then they've got a great chance of winning this game. So, yeah, the perimeter shooting is important, and I think it has to combine with that turnover margin. If Carolina can limit their turnovers, and I'm not going to go with 6. You limit your turnovers to 6, oh, man. I mean, you're talking about a game where you should be able to score easily in the 90s and be right on the precipice of 100 points the way you've been playing here recently on that end of the floor. I think, if you can keep it to maybe somewhere 9, 10, I think you're probably feeling pretty confident about where Carolina's at.
All right. Carolina enters the game with a 20.8% chance to win, according to ESPN's Basketball Power Index. I'll give you the honors. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Oh, I think, look, Carolina is playing better, but Duke's playing sensational. But there ain't no way in hell I'm picking Duke to win this game. Never happens, and it doesn't matter. I think that Carolina can truly win this game because it's at home. If it was the other way around, I would be very, very concerned. But I think with Carolina at home, this crowd, you said earlier, this crowd cannot win you the game. It can't. But I'm going to tell you right now, the environment can do so much for this game. And this is where you need, if you're a Tar Heel fan that's going to be in that building, you should be ready to stand for 40 straight minutes and make noise. That's what you need to be able to do. That building needs to be a part of the recipe for Carolina in this game. I think it will be. I think the way that Carolina is shooting from the outside will show up once again in this game. I think we are in store for a special type of performance from RJ Davis because this is his senior night. And we've seen when Carolina's needed him to step up, he has done it time and time again. I also love the way that this team is rebounding here recently. I think they'll be able to stick with Duke on the boards. I'm going to go bold. I'm going to say they win the rebounding margin over the Duke Blue Devils. I think it'll probably be like Greg Ward said, maybe by 1, but that could be a very key rebound. I think the offensive glass is huge for Carolina, and I think they get to that 90-point mark, which is where I feel like they have to get in this game. I think Carolina wins this game 90-87 over the Duke Blue Devils.
Winning is a lot of times about who has more talent, who executes better, who's coached better. And that's going to need to be on display on Saturday. Carolina has the talent to win the game. They've got a coach that can win in the game. What they have this time around that they did not have a month ago is belief. That team didn't believe they could go into Cameron and win. And that's why they got embarrassed the way that they did. This team believes they can win the game. RJ Davis reiterated that multiple times when he was on with us earlier today, that there's a belief and a confidence in that room. They can play and beat anybody in the country, anytime, anywhere right now. And that's a good thing to have because their talent has always suggested that they could beat these teams because you went to the final second against Kansas. You went to the final second against Michigan State. You were beating Florida with 2 minutes to go. And those were games that if you win, You're not with your backs against the wall and the season goes in a different place. But ultimately, Carolina didn't believe then they could win those games. They believe they can win those games now. Just like they believed in 2022, they could go into that arena with no one giving them a chance and they could beat that Duke team. And that's exactly what they did. I think the environment will be as lively as one that I think we've seen since Hubert Davis became the head coach. And that's saying something because when they met last year in Chapel Hill, that was a real big game, big Duke UNC environment. But, with what this Duke team is, what it represents, the way they've been talked about, I think the 21,750 Carolina fans that are in the building are going to be ready to cheer Carolina to victory. And there's something about when it's senior night and you've got an all-time great, the basketball gods come through. Tyler Hansbrough did not lose, his senior night to Duke. Joel Berry did not lose his senior night against Duke. Luke May, Cam Johnson, Kenny Williams, they did not lose on their senior night against Duke. If there's a guy that could will this team to a win, it's RJ Davis. And if it gets to the point where that's what he feels like he has to do, then I think he's more than comfortable putting himself in that position and willing this team to a victory. They know that if they win, they're in. And they know that if they get in, they can do as much damage as anybody in this conference in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if they can score 90. I don't know that. I think they can score 75, 78, 80. And I think that could be enough to get the job done. I think Carolina emerges victorious. And I think they get a win that they desperately need for themselves. And I selfishly want for a kid that I can't believe 5 years has flown by. And this will be the final time he takes the floor at the Smith Center. I think Carolina wins. The rivalry delivers. And they get a win to secure themselves a spot in the NCAA tournament, and will have us drawing all the comparisons in the world to what this team and what this program did back in 2022. No matter what happens, we encourage you to do a couple of things this weekend. We made the announcement officially last week. We've been promoting it throughout this week. We will be live at the Town Hall Grill in the Southern Village part of Chapel Hill on Saturday for 2 live shows. We'll be live in the afternoon basically we're just going to run it back and preview the game there live on location, have some fun with the owners of the restaurant as well. We haven't set a time for that. That show will not be podcasted. It will just be a live stream that'll be streamed on the Facebook page, the YouTube channel, and, of course, at my personal Twitter page. So once we have a definite time, we'll make sure we get that out to you guys if you want to make plans on being out there for the live show. More importantly, we'll be live from the Town Hall Grill after the game goes final. We're not going to be in the Smith Center. We're not going to be attending the game as fans or as media. So once the game goes final, we'll be live right back here on all these same locations, hopefully talking about a Carolina win. If it goes the other way, though, we'll still be here to talk about it. We want to encourage all of you to join us out there for the game. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to talk Carolina basketball with you and really just enjoy getting to meet the guys that have really made this possible to be given the opportunity to do a live show. So if you can make plans, join us at the Town Hall Grill this Saturday for a preview or a pregame show and a postgame show, as we'll be talking Duke, Carolina multiple times on Saturday.
And we're going to watch the game there too. So we encourage you, come out there. You can watch the game and talk with us about the game while it's going on.
I mean, I didn't feel like I had to be said. Like, if we're there, we're obviously going to watch the game.
Hey, you feel like it didn't have to be said. I feel like we want to encourage these guys to come out there and hang out with us. That's the thing. We're not going to leave and then come back. We're going to be out there the entire day. So, yeah, you'll get us the entire day to be able to talk through. I mean, we'll be there watching the bubble games that are going on around us, all that kind of stuff too. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And, I mean, look, man, That's the most important thing, is that we want you guys to come out there and have a good time and know that you've got friends that'll be hanging out there watching the game with you. That's the most important thing. I think it'll be a real cool experience for us and a real cool experience for you guys as well. If you can't go, of course, over to the Smith Center, this is a great alternative option.
In the meantime, we'll direct you to the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of the game will be provided for you. The preview will go up the day of the game. The recap will probably go up on Sunday morning, just given the fact that we're doing the live show after the game. But we'll have you covered with all things involving the Duke game this weekend. Spring football well underway. Anthony's got you covered with all the news and notes coming out of Bill Belichick's first spring practice as the head coach of Carolina football. So it's a busy time of year for us on the website. Make sure you get there every single morning, every single evening, or every single afternoon for the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. We had editions of Ashton's analysis that we recorded earlier today. He got to get in his thoughts on the Duke game. We just previewed the game for you right here. And, of course, we'll be back on Saturday night with a recap of the game. And tomorrow I've got a press conference to recap as well, so be on the lookout for that episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels and go to hell, Duke.